Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. A tough night for the best league in the world, so thank you to Chelsea and to Enzo Maresca for giving us some content. Chelsea sacked their manager. Good to get something so inevitable done at the start of the year. A move that appears to be what everybody wanted. Maresca said he was having a terrible time. Then he said he'd been talking to other people, all the while getting annoyed with the medical staff for telling him who to pick and how long for. 1 win in 7 on the pitch, sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe, you know the rest. And Chelsea are Chelsea, so it was never going to work. Liam Rossini, favourite for the job. How will Blue Co-owned Chelsea possibly price him away from Blue Co-owned Strasbourg? Alice says, have there ever been more panellists than goals before? It's a great question. Well, look, we'll get to last night's football in a second. But let's do Enzo Maresca leaving Chelsea then. Zarvard says, feel free to cut and paste the analysis of Maresca's firing by Chelsea from any one of the last 15 times or so. Manager thinks they're in charge, finds out they aren't. Tale as old as time at the bridge. Chelsea's statement reads, Chelsea Football Club and head coach Enzo Maresca have parted company. During his time at the club, Enzo led the team to success in the UEFA Conference League and the FIFA Club World Cup. Those achievements will remain an important part of the club's recent history, and we thank him for his contributions to the club. With key objectives still to play for across 4 competitions, including qualification for Champions League football, Enzo and the club believe a change gives the team the best chance of getting the season back on track. We wish Enzo well for the future. And it appears, Mark, that Enzo wanted to leave and Chelsea wanted him to leave, and so that's fine. It's fine for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea do this all the time, but they actually don't get any worse for doing it. There's this belief that you have to have continuity, and Chelsea just have never really had that stability, and it's worked for them. They often roll the dice and win a trophy, as Maresca did, and it felt like this was inevitable. You're right. Once Maresca had started calling people out, even though he didn't mention who it was, you just felt that was the beginning of the end. And when you're not winning games as well, then it does become inevitable. I think it's probably the right decision. If things have got to the stage where it's unworkable and there's a lack of trust between certain departments, it doesn't feel like you can carry on like that. But I mean, when Maresca was appointed, he was a relatively inexperienced coach, and he's got relatively inexperienced players. And I think you will get these kind of ups and downs, and even as a leader, like, he wouldn't have been in that position too many times, where at Chelsea, if you do go on a run, was it 1 win in 7, something like that, like, the pressure does come, and he maybe hasn't got the tools to deal with that at the moment. But that's what you get employing somebody that hasn't managed somebody like Chelsea before. So I just think that we'll be in this situation in probably 12 to 18 months' time, and maybe they would have won an FA Cup or a League Cup and qualified for the Champions League, and everyone will say that they're doing it wrong, Chelsea, but I don't know, it seems to work for them relatively well.
Yeah, and I suppose if you're a Chelsea fan, Lucy, the fact that you've seen so many managers sacked and it doesn't seem to have any discernible difference to you winning trophies or not, and the fact that I don't think many fans particularly warmed to the football that Maresca was playing.
Yeah, I think
that Chelsea fans will be fine about it.
Yeah, I do think it's a little bit different, because this lot above, the new owners, want to do it in a different way. They want to be the project, develop and sell, like basically just a trader. They're just trading, and it's like snakes and ladders. They sort of get better and get better as the players get better, and then they sell, and then they got dropped back down again. That's what it seems like to me. But I've read the reports from both sides, because obviously both sides have been briefing. It's been quite hilarious, bizarre, really. Maresca's culpable, I would suspect, in some issues, like his subs were poor. He's a bit rigid and slow in the way that he played. But you can't expect a manager to function, from the sounds of it, in the level of interference that he had. Something I read yesterday was about the owners wanting autonomy for the medical staff to say the load for each player, which is absolutely ridiculous in a football club. So you basically got someone who knows about players and fitness to say, oh, he only needs 42 and a half minutes or whatever. I mean, I'm being ridiculous, but that's what they're basically saying. He can only play for 30 minutes. And it becomes an issue if you allow backroom staff that much power. The manager is there to get the information from all the experts and then make a decision, because he has got experience and decide then what's going to happen. And it basically creates silos in the training ground, and it's very, very negative. And I would suspect that Maresca has gone, I'm not having this. I'm not having somebody telling me who doesn't really know about football that I can only play a player for that amount of time. And also, I remember the briefing yesterday about him creating that mushroom squad, the bomb squad, being negative all of a sudden. When it happened, everybody was saying how good that he'd separated those players out and the ones that he didn't want. But all of a sudden now that's negative. And I thought that was probably the best thing he did for having a longer period of time at Chelsea, separating players in the training ground and saying, right, I don't want them because there's too many and they're the ones I don't want. And it's the owner's fault and sporting directors. They didn't get rid of them at the time. But yeah, just the fallout from it, and certain journalists have been briefed one way and certain the other way. And it's unbecoming, really.
You say it's unbecoming. It is also quite funny. Like it is one of it's like when players fight on the pitch and the commentator says, well, we don't like to see this. Realistically, we do like to see this. And I feel like the briefing wars after a big managerial sackings are quite entertaining to observe. I want to focus on the medical staff thing because that's something, obviously, me being a layman here, picked up on. First of all, that's one area where I have some sympathy with Maresca for the way he's handled it, because, of course, he's been criticized a lot for excessively rotating and for subbing off players that people don't want to see subbed off. If it turns out that was under direction from the medical staff saying they can only have so and so many minutes, you can understand his frustration for having to be the public face of that decision, for having to sit in the press conference and get killed for having taken someone off after 60 minutes, when in fact he has been told he has to come off after 60 minutes. And I think weirdly, even though the focus on this whole thing is that, he was speaking to other people and blah, 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 he has shown a bit of loyalty, I think, there for not throwing the medical staff under the bus. I don't remember him sitting in the presser saying, stop having a go at me for rotating. I've been told I have to do this, which would have been a very human thing to do when you're getting stick for this. But I am curious about what you said, Lucy, because you obviously know the inner workings of a football club a lot more than I do. For me, being an outsider, being a layman, the idea that the medical staff determine how much physical strain the players should have seems kind of logical, but you feel very strongly that the manager can never be overruled in this, and I think I certainly would be curious to hear more about that, and I think some of the listeners might be too.
I think that that sensible in the football workings of a football club never ever go hand in hand, Lars, and I think historically the manager has the final say, and without that, the players will pick up on anything where the manager doesn't have that sort of autonomy. So as soon as you've got someone else in the club who can say, right, you'll only play 45 minutes, the players just play on it. They know that they go, I'm feeling a little bit, honestly, you have to have one person who says, right, he's playing for a half or whatever it is, 60 minutes. I'll take him off at 60 minutes. If you keep telling a player that they're not quite fit yet or they're tired, then they will believe they're tired. It's psychologically. And I know there's bits where they're injured and they can't play. Fair enough. But they do err on the side of caution, these medical staff. So they will say a lot less because they think that they might end up back in the physio room. But it's a real struggle of power. But players will pick up on anything. So if they think that the physio's got a little bit more power than the manager, or if the manager says you're starting, or I'm not going to start you because of whatever, then they will then go to the. Honestly, it's a soap opera. So anything that you think is sensible and common sense doesn't necessarily work in football. I think that the main point about Maresca, I think he's outgrown being a rookie manager, learning the ropes because he's won things. And the Chelsea board and owners want a manager that they can manipulate, a coach they can manipulate, which is why you've then seen Liam Rossini's name come up, who is probably a good coach, but he wouldn't be, a coach at this stage in his career where you say, he could definitely manage Chelsea, looking at the managers that Chelsea have had in the past. He won't bluster into Stamford Bridge. He will be incredibly thankful he's been given the opportunity, and they will then be able to manipulate him until he starts to win things and then thinks, hang on a minute, I'm better than being manipulated by owners.
So it's this So, sorry, is this the Chelsea cycle we end up getting? Like, they will hire a young up-and-coming manager, which they kind of did with Maresca. He came from Leicester. And then the second at first he accepts all the restraints and goes, yeah, I'm at Chelsea. Awesome. Good players, good stadium, huge name, good salary. And then once he gets them to the Champions League and wins the trophy, he starts going, okay, I'm the man. I can start making demands. And then they sack him. Will it be this forever?
Yeah. Patnam said they needed a puppet, which is sort of, it's good news for Fozzie Bear or Orville. But I think, Mark, isn't that an issue then? If you have a young squad and you get an inexperienced manager, and lots of people have said the reason they can't be consistent is they don't have experience in that side, then you are actually, that project doesn't seem like one which will actually ultimately get real top success.
Chelsea had Thomas Tuchel before. Could you imagine, say, Tuchel walking into that situation, being told
of course not,
what to do by sort of loads of different people? Like he's not having that for 1 second, and nor would any of the really top managers. I mean, Chelsea are 15 points behind Arsenal, and I think that there was an expectation in the summer, whether that's right or wrong, that they would be a lot closer to Arsenal, and they were only 6
Spent
points behind.
£1.6 billion, I think.
Yeah, so I think there have been some poor results as well that go with it that make the decision easier. But I do believe that they want a coach that they can control, and where each department is in charge of whatever they are, and the manager just deals with the on-pitch stuff. And I would say that most of the sort of big coaches wouldn't want to work in those situations.
If you're a Chelsea fan, or if you're the manager or the head coach or the man on the grass, whatever they want to give the title to, don't we want to hear from some of these other people? If there are so many people in the dressing room or on the training ground saying, do this, do that, doesn't whoever coaches that team, and don't the fan deserve to hear from these other people?
Yeah, I've heard things in the past about sporting directors. Like, managers get sacked, sporting directors have nothing on them, even though they've brought the players in. And when the modern structure is a coach coaches the players that the sporting director brings in, but then the manager gets sacked for bad results when it may be to do with players. But these people in the background will want to have their say, but they definitely won't want to go in front of the media. The head of medical services won't want to go in front of the media. And I think from what I've read as well, I think some of the good people that were there at Chelsea since the new owners have come in have sort of been moved out. Academy staff who were there a long time, but obviously produce players, because Chelsea are excellent at producing players for themselves and everybody else. They've sort of disappeared. So good people who have been there for quite a long time. But there's sort of positives to that as well, that you sort of freshen everything up. But these people who are in the background trying to, look after their own little silo and have something to say, and then the owners allow them to do that, must be an absolute nightmare for Maresca. And I would say that it will have contributed to the bad results without a shadow of a doubt in recent times. Everything that's been going on will have contributed to that.
Exciting for the YouTube viewers to see Lars has zoomed himself in to make this very important
entirely accidentally, I might add.
Yeah.
Apparently there's a gesture function on this camera, but how do I zoom myself back out again? This is terrible. I don't want
You're
this.
stuck now. This is you forever, and it means nothing for the people who still remain.
Didn't really
just
do my
listening
skincare routine this morning either. Like the pores are. Anyway,
Lars, you're having one this morning.
Exactly right. It said the tech is not on my side. There is a good point here, an interesting point about accountability, because we have sort of the British football has started importing this more continental model of you have a clearer differential between the head coach and the sporting director who has more long term. But if you look at Germany, the sporting directors speak. The sporting directors do media interviews, especially when things are not going well. The sporting director will often come out and say, like, we believe in the manager, or we have something going on. They're very absent in England now. Every clubs will have one, and they very rarely come out in front of things. In Italy, they'll speak as well, and also in Italy, you have a history of the club president being quite a public figure, often because they're egomaniacs, but also they also come out and take off some of the flack if they need to, and take some ownership over the project. And I think there's something interesting there about how the structures have been changed so that the head coach is now more of a head coach than an old school manager, but he's still this sort of figure that's thrown in front of everything and is the face of the project, and everyone else who actually have a lot of responsibility, they're just in the background. And I think maybe that's something to think about.
And I suppose the other question, Mark, and I'm minded to agree with you that it almost doesn't seem to matter what Chelsea do. They'll just win stuff enough to be, one of the most successful clubs, I guess, in the country. But if this is their model, which is slightly different to under Abramovich, right, which was high profile manager, win something, goes. Like, how long do you give a project of young manager, young team?
Well, I think they'll just consistently change it. The first time there's trouble, the easy thing to do is to particularly with the if the fans start to turn on the manager, and I think that was fair. What would happen in this case with Maresca? Like, it's just an easy person to get rid of. Like who decided to buy, say, Gittins and Garnacho this summer when you already had wide players there at the club that would believe that they're first teamers. Neto, you want Estevao to come in and start playing more minutes, but you've got Gittins and you've got Garnacho, and you just go, well, like, what are you supposed to do with these players? Like, there's a lack of quality in really key positions: goalkeeper, centre forward, centre back. Like, the cornerstones of what makes a successful team, I think, are still missing from Chelsea, despite all the money that's been spent. And like, they have won trophies. I think, like, if you were to be really picky about it, you would say, well, Chelsea, like, and when Mourinho was there particularly, but even after that, like, they were winning the really biggest trophies, and that was the Premier League, and then they won 2 Champions Leagues as well. Like, they feel a long way off winning the Premier League at the moment, and Arsenal have been through kind of that stability and backed Arteta when things got tough. And the Champions League, okay, it's still early days. You don't know if they might go on to win it, but they don't look like one of the favourites at the moment to win the Champions League. And I think those are the trophies where maybe you do actually need somebody longer term, and you need to believe in something with the manager to go on and challenge Arsenal and Man City, because Chelsea are a long way off being able to do that on a consistent basis. And if you spend over £1 billion, like, you would expect to be challenging, I think, for the Premier League. So maybe there is a fundamental flaw in what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and actually that sort of depends on how the owners view success, Lucy. Because you imagine with that kind of investment that it is leagues and Champions Leagues.
Yeah, but I'm not sure, to be honest, Max. I just think that they the way that they look at it from a sort of American point of view of making money from. Well done, Lars. Well done, Lars. Looking at it on a spreadsheet of how much can we make of the play, I'm sure Estevao, for instance, which is a great signing, you look at the potential he has, and that they'll probably sell him for a lot more than they bought him. I think that is success to them. That's what it seems like, anyway.
And yet, Lars, sometimes they have looked brilliant. Even, I suppose the Villa game is an example where they haven't looked brilliant for a whole game, but occasionally you watch them. I can't remember. There was once this season where we were like, oh, hang on, maybe the Arsenal game or something, where we were like, hang on, these guys there is real potential in this team. And there is, of course,
there is
potential in this team.
So this is the other thing. Obviously, as fun as the briefing wars are about the disagreements and the things, there's also this element of, okay, in this last Pochettino, and this is the Pochettino season before he went, they finished 6th in the league, but they were 4th on the XG. Last season, they finished 4th in the league and were 4th on the XG. If my opinion counts for anything, I think this is the 4th best squad in the league. I think if you go through them man for man, I think they're just about, like, they're not as good as Arsenal, City, and Liverpool on paper, but of the group after that, I think they've probably got the strongest squad for me. So they should be around about 4th. Would be a good place for them to be. They're currently 5th, 6th on the numbers. And if you're Chelsea, like, you've got the same number of points as a dreadful Manchester United team. 1 more point than Sunderland, 2 more points than Everton. That's kind of where you are. Is that good? Like, is that where this squad should be? I feel like no. So there's also this element of Maresca apparently speaking to City, apparently, like, not suggesting he might be convinced to not speak to City if they hand him a new contract. Part of the briefing wars. That's something that's been put out there. I feel like playing that card when you're not doing that well seems like a bit of a gamble. Like, I think just based on performances and for results and the general trajectory, Chelsea were probably looking at it saying, we're not sure about where this is going. And if the manager picks that time to start like throwing himself around and disagreeing with people about stuff and talking to other people, then yeah, you make the decision very easy for the guys upstairs, I guess.
Welcome to part 2 of the Guardian Football Weekly. As producer Joel says, who knew dry January would also apply to the football? Thomas says, was that the worst day of football ever? Like the absolute antithesis of that crazy Boxing Day result list. I mean, just in the Premier League, EFL was pretty good. Tom, why are all 8 teams vying for that coveted final slot on tonight's match of the day? It was a shame in a way that Fulham and Palace scored, because I'd love just a picture of just 4 0-0s. Of the 0-0s, because we'll do the 0-0s first and then we'll go to the goals. Sunderland Man City, I think, Lucy, was the best game. And actually, given that the entire Sunderland squad's gone to AFCON, given who they were playing, and sort of in terms of stoic defending and just I mean, we've been impressed with Sunderland, especially at home, for a long time, but this was another real great example.
Yeah, I just think they knew that there is some fragility about Manchester City, and Sunderland played the way you should play against City when you're at home, and they just have this ability, a little bit like Leeds and Ellen Road, to use the energy of the crowd to help them. They at times they pressed the life out of City, at times they then dropped and stopped them from getting through, and they're absolutely brilliant at it. I think really well coached. That's the first thing. Physicality high, which is obviously something that you've looked at Sunderland's recruitment, and whether it's the first choice that have gone off to AFCON or the ones remaining, they have to have that sort of high level of physicality. And it just shows you that if you've got that physicality, you work hard and you try and be bold, which is what they tried to be. But they needed that little bit of luck, I think, last night as well. But I mean, yeah. It's a great for Sunderland, and great. I mean, I've done a bit of work up there and with Sunderland, and it's such a massive club up in the northeast that you sort of smile at the joy around the place of how well the team's doing.
Yeah, I mean, to be unbeaten at home still, this far into the season, they played 10 home games, Mark, is so impressive. And of course, City missed. Savinho had a couple of good chances, and Haaland had one straight at the keeper. There was that brilliant moment, almost summed up their defending, where Mukiele, I think, took one in the face from Doku, and then it came out and someone else kicked it in Alderete's head. And you were like, this is, that is when, as a fan base, you think this is proper defending.
Yeah, and they've played Arsenal now. They've played Man City. They've beaten Newcastle. So it's not like it's been a really easy run of fixtures. Sometimes the calendar can work out that maybe you end up with all of the kind of easy games in inverted commas at home first half of the season, and your record looks false. But they've actually taken on the 2 best teams, and done Arsenal a massive favour as well last night. But it wasn't as if City had loads and loads of chances. They only had 4 shots on target. I think they did enough to win the game, City, but it was still a great effort. Rose in goal, as he just, a bit like Matt Sells last year, he just has this sort of just belief that nothing's getting past him, and you wonder how sustainable that is, but it's great while it lasts. And I know he's been shouted out a lot, but I think the signing of Xhaka in the summer, it definitely one of the best of the season. He'd be knocking on the door of any kind of team of the season at the halfway stage. His influence on the side is just enormous, and he does both sides of the game. And also just his leadership qualities as well there. Just a really significant player. And when they signed him, I wasn't sure he kind of had the legs, I would say, to maybe sort of still be able to do it central midfield in the Premier League. But he's so important to what they're trying to do.
Also, just must be so rewarding for him. I mean, he could have gone off to Saudi Arabia or something and just kind of knocked about, counted his money, and played silly sort of park football. But instead, he sort of made the call to go to Sunderland in the Northeast and try to help them stay up after getting promoted. And it's a huge professional challenge for him. And I'm hoping he's enjoying the Northeast off the pitch. I mean, it's a lovely part of the world. But on the pitch, certainly, he's really lived up to his billing and is doing a great job in midfield. And that must be so much more rewarding for you to have a year or two like this towards the end of your career before you go off and maybe, make the big pointless check somewhere else.
The point is as well, Max, is that I don't think every single experienced player could do what he's doing. He's obviously a good player. But what Mark said about his I think the most important thing is his influence on others. So when he's on the pitch, he's the manager on the pitch, basically. So Labrie can just think, right, I've given him the instruction. It's loud in here. He can be the one that affects others. And that's when you get to that sort of next level as a player where you're very good yourself, but you make others better and you influence players. But I don't think it's every single experienced player would be able to do that. I think it takes a lot more effort from him and, off the pitch as well. So real credit to the way he's sort of gone into Sunderland and just embraced everything about it.
Must have been hard, Mark, as a Spurs fan, for saying a central midfielder who could do both parts of the game. I thought, we'll get to it. And look, really impressive as well, Mark, that they lost 6 players and they weren't fringe players to AFCON. 3 draws in a row, but they are unbeaten since the players left.
Yeah, I expected Sunderland to drop off. Well, I expect them to drop off, almost as soon as the good results started in August. But, it's particularly at this point, I did think that it would be too much for them. And you're getting much bigger clubs moaning about injuries and absentees at this stage. And you've seen kind of what Sunderland have had to put up with. It's their own, they recruited the players and they knew that AFCON was happening. So it's not like it was a surprise, but it's still a lot to take out of your squad. And like I said, they limited City to, particularly first half. There was the Haaland chance and there was the offside Bernardo Silva one, that was close, but it wasn't like there was loads and loads of chances from Man City. Savinho should have scored, I think, in the second half, and they were knocking on the door. But there was a good tactical, I suppose, game plan really from Sunderland, because you can't run after City for 90 minutes. You have to be clever in when you do the pressing and then when you sit back. And there was probably goes back to the Xhaka thing there, but there was an intelligence to the way that they kind of went after City at points, but then dropped off as well. So, a good tactical performance. And, they'll fancy their chances at White Hart Lane on Sunday as well.
Blimey. Yes, nice moment. Brobby sort of throwing Diaz on the floor before shooting straight at Donnarumma was good. And look, Guardiola almost scored an unbelievable goal, and it looked totally intentional, that sort of back heel volley that he tried. He has scored the occasional brilliant one. To Liverpool then, where we start the chat about booze. Lots of booze at full time. I think, Lars, the performance and the result, I guess, it was pretty lackluster. Producer Joel saying looked like a team that stayed up to watch all of the hootenanny, which I don't believe anyone's ever got to the end of it, have they? Tom says, why is slot ball so boring? When does a calming presence become a handbrake? How many passes back to Virgil van Dijk is too many? It's not tick-a-tack possession, it's just slow.
So there's a risk that I'm just being contrarian on this, but I watched 90 minutes of this game and I thought Leeds were really good. I just thought they were really well organised. Obviously, you'd want Liverpool to move the ball a little bit quicker. You want there to be a little bit more movement, and you're kind of waiting for Florian Wirtz in particular to maybe do a little bit more in terms of finding openings. But Leeds kept their shape really well and were aggressive in the challenges without giving away too many fouls, didn't allow themselves to get dragged out of position too often, and just it's not like there were a ton of spaces that Liverpool very obviously could have exploited. I came away from that feeling more impressed with Leeds' defending than exasperated at Liverpool's failure to attack. But I have noticed in the aftermath of the game that not everyone felt that way.
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess that is a way we watch football sometimes, when we're looking from a particular point of view, that we forget, there is an opposition. There are players literally trying to stop you doing what you're trying to do. But it is a really impressive point, Lucy, for Leeds and for Daniel Farke, who in the last few weeks, they've been so impressive, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, he's stumbled upon a solution for the players that he's got. The league that he's playing in, and just that sort of change to 3-5-2. And what I would say is last night, it shouldn't have just been so easy to defend in a 5-4-1 and keep Liverpool out from a Liverpool point of view. I think that Liverpool made it easy for Leeds to sort of be in that structure, that nobody committed a defender. Probably TK did it in the second half, trying to get in behind. Nobody made those runs in behind. Didn't move the ball quick enough. So I think from a Leeds point of view, they were like, yeah, it was brilliant, but Liverpool didn't really sort of test us. But yeah, he sort of changed it to this 3-5-2. Calvert-Lewin getting himself in form and fit has helped loads, because at some stage just before he started scoring, he didn't really know where the goals were going to come from for Leeds, and that was a real problem. So there's only so much a defence can really defend in the Premier League without it being too much pressure if the forwards aren't scoring. But yeah, they get the ball wide, they put the ball in the box. Set pieces very strong. They've obviously looked at it in the summer and thought, right, where do promoted teams score their goals? Mostly from set piece situations. So let's try and make sure that we were as good as possible at doing that, and it's worked. And you know, I did the Leeds Chelsea game for radio, and as soon as I saw Chelsea on the pitch warming up, I thought they're not ready for this. They are not ready for this atmosphere. And it was as if, why is somebody not saying to them, Leeds fans and Leeds players see this as a rivalry? And the same, I'm doing the Leeds Man United game on Sunday. If those Man United players are not ready for the effects of the rivalry, then they will just do what Chelsea does. So they've got that power of just a unity at home, but you know, away from home, they were very, very good last night. But I do think Liverpool made it easier for them.
Where I would maybe question what I would have wanted to ask Arne Slot if I'd been in the presser would be, was this a game where it made sense to put Wirtz out on the wing? Like, I do accept that Florian Wirtz needs to do a little bit more, clearly, and he's a very, very talented player. I think everyone watching him can see the close control he has and all this sort of stuff. But when you're playing a team who are sitting back in this sort of shape and who are not allowing themselves to come out and be tempted to open up the game, you are going to have to try to knit through that. And sticking someone with the sort of quick feet of Wirtz out on the wing, and if you watch his touch mat from yesterday, he was just out on the flank almost all the time. I'm not sure that gets the best out of him. And I know there are games where you might be hesitant to have him in the middle because he doesn't offer you a lot defensively. He's not a super physical guy, but that's not a big concern in this game because Leeds aren't trying to come out and make a game of it. You're trying to find an opening here, and I thought, again, you're expecting him to do more, but I'm not sure his position really helped him yesterday.
I enjoyed Ekitike heading it against Perry's head. I mean, the cross, was it Frimpong? I can't remember. Absolutely hammered it. I mean, I'm not sure it was a cross, so he did well to actually get his head on it. And some good humble bragging from Arne Slot. He wanted a penalty. Ekitike might have been fouled, but stayed on his feet. It's definitely an issue that players don't get decisions if they stay on their feet. But he said, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that one of my players stayed on their feet. It happened against West Ham. Paqueta should have got a second yellow, but one of my players stayed on his feet. It's just a team who we are. And unfortunately, it's not recognised. I saw Leeds players going down in the second half. The question is, should we change or not? I don't think we should. Are they the only honourable side in the Premier League, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, these small clubs like Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, they're always on the wrong end of these decisions, aren't they? It's so unfair. I think there would have been frustration. I just think he picked too defensive a side, really. A lot of there weren't enough offensive players on there to impact the game at the start. So I think what the question the listener sort of posed, I would agree. And I think that in trying to fix the defence that was a problem, say about a month ago when they were conceding too many goals, I do think that they've now lost something going the other way. I thought they were really poor when they won at Spurs a couple of weeks ago, scraped past Wolves, and now this 0-0. I'm not sure that kind of just because they're now conceding fewer goals that everything's sort of worked out well now for Liverpool, because I don't think they're creating the volume of chances that they should be. And he had enough attackers on the bench, really, to suggest that maybe just even one or two more offensive players could have made a difference from the start, because once you allow Leeds to get into a kind of rhythm and, you want to get after them early, really. Right? Once they're settled into the game, it can become much more difficult to then impact the result, I would say.
Talking about shoring up a defence but affecting things going forward to the G-Tech. Brentford 0, Spurs 0. Simon said, should the FA look at charging Spurs and Brentford for putting on the worst 90 minutes of football in the best league in the world? Dan, if Tottenham swap Frank for a cardboard cutout, would the cutout be more ambitious? I have seen so many League Two games like this. This was bleak from both teams, actually, like an exhibition in giving the ball away, an exhibition in clearances, just sort of being hoofed out for a throw-in. I guess Brentford were marginally better. Romero probably should have been sent off when Thiago was through, and Romero just completely missed him. I don't sure how VAR missed that. And look, the big story, I guess, you're Tottenham fan, is Thomas Frank getting booed by the travelling Spurs fans when he went over to applaud them?
Do
Your
wonder,
thoughts, Mark?
Max, you think the VAR just fallen asleep? I mean, because I was struggling to sort of to stay awake for it, because it did,
Lost the will to live.
Just like, I can't be bothered here. I think in Thomas Frank's head, he's thinking that's not a bad point at Brentford. They're doing really well at home. They scored a lot of goals against Liverpool, against Manchester United. We'll go there.
We'll like 3 days ago, yeah.
So we'll go there. We'll be really sort of disciplined, look to get something on the break. And, worst thing that can happen here is we get a 0-0 and there's 4 points over that festive period. And then we've got Sunderland at home and we're not that far off top 5. And he would have then walked over to the Tottenham fans at the end and got a different view on what's going on. And it's not that game in isolation. That performance has been kind of the default one at home and away, which is why they've struggled so often at home, because they've got no way of breaking teams down if it's not from a set piece. The amount of times this season I've seen Pedro Porro sort of open up his body and just curl a right-footed pass to the opposition defender. It just happens all the time. Archie Gray as a number 10. He was playing centre-back this time last year. Now he's playing as a number 10. I really like Archie Gray, and he was beginning to develop in that sort of position, just, I don't know, as a 6 or maybe as an 8. But a 10, I don't think that that's fair to ask him to play that position. He didn't seem to know kind of what he was, sort of how to play that role. There's no way of progressing the ball up the pitch, and it's not getting any better. So that's why the fans are unhappy. It's not, they've drawn a game against Brentford and the shame of that. It's that there's no sign of progress in this team.
He said,
at all.
He said, I think on being booed, they seemed like they were not too satisfied. It's fair when we don't hit that top performance overall. It's double-sided because I think we need to understand is the acknowledgement of the defensive side of the game. We've done excellent today against a team who just scored 3 against Liverpool, 3 against Man United, so on and so on. Of course, the offensive part needs to be better. There's no two ways about that. And I suppose the devil's advocate position is, Lars, that Brentford have the 4th best home record in the league. Only Arsenal, City and Villa have a better home record than them. Their home record is better than any away record in the league. So this is the 4th hardest game of the season. I mean, it sounds silly to say.
Yes.
I mean, look at
Yes,
Mark
that is silly to say, Max.
I'm just looking at, statistically, the way the league table set up. I'm clutching because it was insipid from both teams, but it was, Spurs just don't know what, and they are missing their creative players. I would love to see what they're like with Maddison and Kulusevski with this, robust defence.
Would they start? Would they maybe be on the bench and then Paulinho at number 10 or something? You never know with this dude. No, listen, you said the word shame, Langdon. I think we're onto something here. I think, and this is a very serious proposal for me, I think they need to change the rules of the Premier League, like the founding, the official rules of the whole division. And this is very specific, but this is a clause that should be in there next to the PSR and all the stuff. If your club has an annual revenue of over 500 million, and your goalkeeper gets booked for time wasting when you're drawing 0-0 against Brentford, that's an immediate 10-point deduction and a 5-year touchline ban for the manager. So go away.
That was with 20 minutes.
There's no need for this. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Listen, you're not wrong that Brentford are not an easy place to go. But I really think, just from the Tottenham fan perspective, if you go to Brentford, you try to make a game of it, you get done on counterattacks and set pieces, and you draw 2-2 or lose 3-2. You can live with that. That's what happens at Brentford sometimes. But going away to Brentford with the budget you've had, and Spurs are not a small club anymore. They just seem to act like one right now. If you're going and not even trying to play football is embarrassing. And if he thinks that's what the Spurs manager should do, you should go back to Brentford. You seemed very happy there. Maybe that was a good place for him. It's terrible.
The flip side, Lars, the flip side would be people would say you sound entitled. Because this is where Tottenham are the squad is expensive, Lucy. It's expensive, but I don't know if it's good.
Thomas Frank's fighting for his life in terms of being a Spurs manager because of the talk. So he's not going to do an Ange. I know that's completely the other end of the scale. He's always going to be safe first. That's him. Building slowly, but I think Mark's right about that. They haven't got the attackers on the pitch who can unlock defensive and be creative. And so it ends up just being just stodge the whole time unless they score something from it. And there are some bright spots. Archie Gray's a bright spot. I'm not sure he's a 10, like Mark said. But I do think that when you've not got any of those creative players on the pitch, then you have very low levels of creativity. That's just a fact. And he's not then going to go to Brentford and for various reasons, including the fact that he's returned to Brentford, and allow Brentford any sort of wriggle room at all in the game. And obviously that the result is what came last night.
Just to say though, Max, I mean,
yeah, Mark?
like, you know, from Brentford's point of view, like how far they've come that a team with the revenue of Tottenham actually go there and think that that's a good point. When you think like Keith Andrews would not
100%.
have been most people's choice of a sort of Premier League manager to replace Frank, and like they look no different, I would say, and that's sort of complimentary towards him that
and
they've lost
slightly
players.
worrying about Thomas Frank.
Like, there's a golden rule: do not take managers from Brentford and Brighton because they're not the most important people at them clubs, and like that is just the way it is.
I think
It's a really interesting point, actually. Yes, Les.
having been very flippant, I want to make like the more serious point, which is that since Lucy invoked the spectre of Ange, listen, no one's arguing that what Spurs did last year was smart or sensible or viable, right? Come on. And I think it was entirely fair for Thomas Frank to come into that club and think, whatever else I do, we need to defend differently. We need to stop goals going in. We need to stop defending, conceding the same stupid goals every week and to start from the back. But he also does need to, in the beginning, yes, play the Bentancur Palhinha double pivot and try to stop things from going in all the time. Ban all kinds of passing through the middle and just get it wide and to dribble it. All this sort of stuff. But like after a while, you need to start to develop some kind of game plan. You need to develop some, and I get that that's harder when you've not got Maddison in the squad. But you've also you've not got a lot of passers in the team. I mean, I'm very intrigued to see who they target in January and in the summer, because they need midfielders who can pass the ball, and they that was the case in the summer as well, and they bought Palhinha instead. So I don't know, maybe they don't want that.
Yeah,
Let's get Glenn Hoddle, Xabi Alonso, Kaka. That's what we need. Tom says, who would have guessed Crystal Palace and Fulham will be joint top scorers for 2026? And look, without Lucy Tom Kearney, right, there's sort of no moment of quality in the whole, offensive quality in the whole night of football, really.
No. Yeah, it's an interesting one because I've done Palace a couple of times in the last few games, and I look at Ollie Glasner. He's obviously trying consistently to make the point that he's not got enough support in terms of the players in his squad, and they're trying to sign Brennan Johnson, aren't they, from Spurs? Who I'm trying to think whether he will convert him into a wing back or he'll play him in one of the 10s, because he is historically known for converting wingers into wing backs, but it's as if he didn't quite get. So I did the Coops game in Europe on the Thursday, and then they got 48 hours later Saturday Leeds, and then Leeds ran all over them. But he tried to sort of change it and then ended up not getting really as much out of both games that he wanted to. And I think they avoided the 4th straight Premier League defeat. Palace, they haven't won since Shelbourne, I think it is. So it's sort of tumbled into something that's not quite right at the moment. And hopefully, from Palace' point of view, whether they make the signings in January, I'm sure they will, because Glasner is basically hanging if you're not going to support me, then I'm off, and he's supposed to be off anyway. So yeah, it probably there's a little bit of instability behind the scenes there, I would suspect. But yes, Tom Kearney, who's obviously, as everybody listening to the pod knows, his mum and dad just live around the corner from me, and I knew Tom, 6'3" Tom, who got released at Leeds for being too small. He had the bit of quality. And he always left foot's a wand.
That's it. As he sorted his parents out, the Kearneys living in a big palace.
Yes. Obviously, because they live around the corner from me, it's an absolute palace.
Yeah, of course. I thought so. I thought so. Look, Glasner said afterwards, and like Castagna has a massive chance to win it for Fulham. Then Anderson boots it over the bar. And Glasner said afterwards, we're in survival mode right now. And we've talked about this. It's interesting, he's not quite gone full Maresca, but he is unlikely to be there next season. So if you are a player like Brennan Johnson, you're thinking, well, do I who's going to manage this club? Like, what am I joining? Which does affect your the players they can get.
Yeah, I definitely. If you are Brendan Johnson, just to use that example, like it's no good really Glasner saying, "Well, I'd see you as this." If Glasner's leaving in a few months anyway, I think that him constantly talking down things at Palace doesn't help. When you're talking about energy around the club, if the manager's not bringing that energy to press conferences, I think it then becomes easier for the players to not bring it on the pitch. Like they come into this season though with a squad that was just not deep enough to compete on multiple levels, and it's not like they've got loads of injuries, but even 2 or 3 out of that first team just takes it out of what Palace are able to do. And at the moment they're missing their entire right side. Sarr's away at AFCON and Munoz is injured, and like that's I always felt with Palace like that was where the threat came from, and so it's just limited at the moment. They only had a couple of shots on target in the game, and like Fulham were the side that looked more likely to go on and get the 3 points. While this wasn't a classic, Max, I watched 3 games yesterday, and this was miles better than Brentford against Tottenham and Northampton against Stockport in League One, which Stockport was so bad in the first half that Dave Challinor made 4 changes at half time, and they didn't get much better in the second half. So it was a bit of a slog of a day. Yeah,
that is a tough old day. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So look, the quarter-final draw and sort of the road to the final for AFCON's been done. We're going to do an AFCON special the week after next, I think. Mali, Tunisia, Senegal, Sudan. In one bit, Egypt, Benin versus Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso in one, South Africa, Cameroon, Morocco, Tanzania in the third, and Algeria, DR Congo, Nigeria, Mozambique, and the other one. I mean, the big story is Gabon. Remarkable story. The government has announced the suspension of the national team, sacking the coach, kicking Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang out of the squad after 3 defeats at AFCON. Gabon's acting sports minister announced the suspension of the national team on TV after they finished bottom of the group and were eliminated. Given the Panthers' disgraceful performance at AFCON, the government's decided to dissolve the coaching staff, suspend the national team until further notice, and exclude players Bruno Aquile Manga and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. This is Simplice Desiro Mambula after Wednesday's 3-2 loss to the Côte d'Ivoire in Marrakesh. So that's like Keir Starmer disbanding the England team if we don't get through the group at the World Cup. That's an extraordinary story.
I just think Spurs fans hear this and say, maybe we need to get the Gabonese government in to just kind of, to take charge of matters that they seem to know what to do. I'm also worried about this news that they've dissolved the technical staff. That sounds like a crime. Like, it's definitely not. Definitely not. If I was the Gabonese hitman, I'd be laying low.
You would be on the floor.
Do Gabon? Does the Gabon government have jurisdiction over the N17? We'll find out, I guess. Lots of EFL. We'll do an EFL podcast next week, by the way, to catch up on all of it. Middlesbrough lost away at Derby. They sit down to 3rd in the Championship. Ipswich overtook them with a 2-1 win over Oxford, who are down near the bottom. It's very tight at the bottom of the Championship. Coventry still top, clear by 8 points, having a little bit of a wobble. 1 win in 4. They drew at the Valley last night. Pleased for the Charlton fans to get a point after we never lose at Fratton Park. And I've written a column about this. I've gone on a deep dive watching all the vlogs from the Charlton, the guys with the selfie sticks filming themselves, and actually much more sort of interesting and sweet content than I was expecting from, people who hold mobile phones at football matches. I've changed my opinion slightly. A big win for Cambridge. Ben Knight, who was given his debut by Pep and kept Cole Palmer out of the England youth team and is now playing for us. I wonder what it must be like for him going, what am I doing here? But he scored 2 and hit the bar with an overhead kick. It was wonderful stuff as we beat Walsall to go 5th. Answers, what did Lars eat for Christmas? Feels like the wrong panelist to ask, but we'll start with that. Lars?
We had pinnekjøtt, which is mutton, basically. It's Norwegian, traditional West Norwegian thing. Pinnekjøtt means literally stick meat. So it's basically lamb ribs that have been cooked in a particular way. They've been cured and also,
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's very, very good.
Lovely stuff. Lucy, we'll save the best for last, of course. Lucy, what was talk us through your plate? Feels a bit late now, but it is Mark Langdon's first appearance.
We actually went out and it was a little bit disappointing where we went near us.
Did it?
I know. But I had turkey.
You,
but
Neil Redfern, Andy Rammell, Darren Barnard.
And my mum.
Yeah, and your mum. But it was a bit what? The turkey was dry, was it? Or
No, the
vibe
turkey was
wasn't
all
there?
right, but we were in the second sitting of this restaurant who'd taken far too much on, and it tasted a little bit like dishwasher fluid, like they'd not rinsed the plates properly. So yeah, it was pretty disappointing.
Good stuff. Gravy and fairy
Ashley
liquid.
Ward wasn't happy.
Yeah, was I know, disappointed. Yeah, I kicked off. Mark, go on then. Let's just talk us through your big plate of meat. What a way to start the first podcast of 2026.
So the most disappointing thing was went to Fishmonger's. They had no lobster tails left. So the starter was minus lobster tail. So it was just a sort of basic prawn cocktail. I do miss the lobster tail in that.
Okay.
I had cockles afterwards, though, so that was okay. The main course, it was a while ago now. So I think I had turkey. I think I had gammon or ham for like the next week. It felt like, I think that's just gone. Roast potatoes, Yorkshire puddings, pigs in blankets, sausage meat. Not to be confused with stuffing. When I say sausage meat, sometimes people feel that's a stuffing. It's just sausage meat. And I also had some honey carrots as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then cake and custard for dessert. And yeah, like I say, I had some cockles about 9:30 that night.
Where do the cockles go? Where's the space for the cockles in the Langdon gut?
I can eat pints of them, Max.
6 pints of cockles, please. All right, that'll do for today. Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year to you.